Hello and welcome back to the channel. We'll be doing a story about the youngest ever soldier, who was a 6-year-old who fought for the Red Army and was an army lieutenant during World War II. And let's get on with the video.
It was made possible by Warpath, the free-to-play mobile strategy game. Warpath offers you the chance to take charge of faithful, historically accurate World War II battlegrounds right on your phone. You can experience classic battles such as Mustang, Simple History, Strider Gold, today. Dismissed. Aleshkov, son of the regiment. Today, dismissed.
There we go.
The 6-year-old Red Army lieutenant of World War II. Sergei Seryosha Aleshkov, son of the regiment, World War II.
You have to think the Russians got very desperate when Germany did that surprise invasion, and then so they had to just get almost everyone onto the war, and so they even employed children. And during the Battle of Berlin, the Germans started using children from the Hitler Youth, which was actually quite surprising since they'd never used children before in a war.
During the Great Patriotic War against the Germans from 1941 to 1945, the Soviet Union mobilized all of its resources to defend the motherland. Over 34 million people bore arms during the 4 years of the conflict, including women, old men, and youngsters. It's estimated that thousands of children under the age of 16 years old fought in the ranks of the Red Army.
Which was technically illegal, but they still had to do it anyway. But then it was a war on which we'd never seen before, on a scale which we'd never seen before. They kind of had to.
One of them was Sergei Seryosha Aleshkov, the youngest soldier of World War II. Like most of the children that fought alongside the Red Army soldiers, Sergei Aleshkov was driven into the war by circumstances. When the Germans attacked the Soviet Union in June 1941, he lived with his mother and 3 older brothers in the village of Grin in the Kaluga region, some 200 miles away from Moscow. At the time, he was just 5 years old. Soon, the war came to his doorstep, and his 2 eldest brothers were enlisted. Then, in autumn 1941, the Germans stormed through his village on their way to Moscow. Even before the front stabilized near the Soviet capital, the Red Army High Command began organizing partisan units behind.
And also, they started to just employ everyone into the army. There was 12-year-olds, there were 10-year-olds, and then there was Sergei, who was the youngest ever person to fight in a war, up to this date as far as we are aware. And I think the Red Army also had the oldest person as well.
The front line. Sergei's home village, Grin, became a base for the local partisan detachment. His family, like all the other villagers, supported the partisans with food and shelter. His family, like all the other villagers, supported the partisans with food and shelter. In the summer of 1942, the Germans attacked the village to destroy the partisan camp. Seryosha's village suffered annihilation as the Germans killed all those who were suspected of helping the partisans. Among the murdered villagers were Sergei's mother and brother. His 10-year-old brother, Pieta, was hanged.
It was often stuff like this would happen. The Germans would just try and take over a village and just kill anyone who they suspected of helping the army or being in the army.
While his mother was shot trying to save her son, Seryosha too would have probably been killed, but he managed to escape the horror by being pushed out a back door and running for his life. With no one left to care for him, and with his home village burned to the ground, Seryosha ran off into the woods. He spent several days wandering through the forest before being saved by a scout unit of the 142nd Guards Infantry Regiment of the 47th Guards Rifle Division.
Technically illegally joined them.
It was fortunate for him that the scouts were patrolling that remote region far behind the front line. When they found Seryosha, the little boy was in a terrible state. He was half starved and disoriented, and his body was covered in scabs from insect bites. The soldiers wrapped him in a horse blanket and took him to the safety of their headquarters. The boy quickly recovered. The entire unit grew very fond of him, so he became the unit's...
In fact, he became the mascot, and he loved it there so much that after the war he wanted to stay in the army.
mascot. The regiment's commander, Major Mikhail Vorobyov, showed a special affection toward Seryosa, so he adopted him. Major Vorobyov had no wife or children of his own. Seryosa even suggested a suitable wife for the major, regimental nurse Nina Bedova, whom the boy was very fond of. For the major, adopting the boy was not only a choice of his heart, but also a wise decision.
Yeah.
He knew Seryosa would not end up hungry in the regiment, as he probably would if he was put into an orphanage.
And as well, he also knew that they could have much larger success with him than they, because he was alone and he needed help.
That was the beginning of Private Sergei Oleshkov's war. In November of 1942, the 142nd Guards Infantry Regiment was transferred to Stalingrad. Sergei naturally went with them. He delivered newspapers and letters to the soldiers on the front line, and
He even actually had his own pistol, which he used at the battle in Stalingrad.
sang songs to cheer them up. Overall, he was responsible for boosting the unit's morale.
He actually, yes, he used to dance with them, but he would create poems and recite them to him, and it boosted morale so much that they felt like they could actually fight, while before they just lost all courage in the war because Germany was pushing so far into Russia.
And providing soldiers with the image of their kids that they missed so much. The unit kept him as far from the front line as they could, but the boy did his part in defeating the enemy. One day, as he was performing his usual duties, he spotted some suspicious-looking characters hiding in the haystack. He knew that he needed to rush back and report it to the HQ. As it turned out, these were German artillery forward fire spotters.
Yes.
The Germans were quickly disposed of, and Sergei received praise for his actions. On another occasion, he and his adoptive father, Major Vorobyov, found themselves in the middle of a German barrage. Vorobyov pushed his son to safety and jumped into a dugout, which was then hit by a shell. The major was wounded and buried under a pile of dirt and debris.
And Sergei actually dug him out so that he could be saved, and it turned out that if he had not done that, his adopted father would have been killed.
Seryosa tried to dig him out, but didn't have the strength to do it, so he ran to seek help. A squad of sappers hurried over and managed to dig the major out of the dugout. On April 27, 1943, Sergei received a medal for military merit from the divisional commander in recognition of his bravery. Being always around his new father, Sergei considered himself to be nothing less than the commander's adjutant. Therefore, he insisted on wearing an officer's uniform.
Yes, he did.
He got one, a proper small-size version of the Red Army officer's uniform, with small leather boots. Abessa was very proud of his uniform and rank, but the latter almost cost him his life. While he was delivering letters to soldiers, a German aircraft spotted him. The first thing the German pilot saw was shiny shoulder straps. The pilot opened fire with his machine guns and wounded...
Assuming that he was an officer. And actually, because of that, he was very badly wounded, but still managed to survive, which was extremely surprising for the injuries he sustained.
Sergei in the heel. Unfortunately, this was not his only close encounter with death. In May 1943, the entire regiment was crossing the northern Donets River. An artillery shell exploded near to the raft Sergei was in and threw the boy into the water. Sergei would have surely drowned if it wasn't for a quick-thinking soldier who jumped into the water to grab him. Another time, he was crossing the Dnieper River on the pontoon ferry with his father in a jeep. When the vehicle reached dry land, it ran over and set off a landmine that threw the jeep into the air. The driver was killed instantly. Major Vorobyov was concussed, but Seryosa ended up without a scratch.
Which is extremely surprising, but, you know, he was young, and he would bounce back from injuries much easier, but still, being able to survive a landmine, almost drowning, and being shot, it's no wonder he gained a high rank from that. And in fact, he gained such a high rank that he outranked most of the older people. He outranked. He was going to outrank his father. If he carried on, he could have outranked his father, and he was 6.
Throughout the rest of the war, Sergei followed his father and the 142nd Guards Infantry Regiment wherever they went. In 1944, while in position on the river Vistula in Poland, the commander of the 8th Guards Army, General Vasily Chuikov, paid a visit to the unit. Of course, he asked to meet Seryosa and was impressed with the boy. As a souvenir of his visit, Chuikov gave him a Browning pistol as a present. After the meeting, General Chuikov gave instructions that Seryosa was to be sent to the Suvorov Military School in Tula, where he remained until the end of the war. Nevertheless, Seryosa received the Medal for Victory over Germany in the Great Patriotic.
He also became a military leader after military school, I think.
War of 1941 through 1945. Sergei's fragile health prevented him from pursuing a military career after the war, so he enrolled in law school. He worked in the prosecutor's office and as a legal advisor in the plexiglass plant. He died of a heart attack in 1990 in the city of Chelyabinsk. Sergei Seryosha Aleshkov was the...
I've actually gone to see his medals. I think they're up in... I forgot what museum they're in, but they are incredibly beautiful.
Youngest combatant of World War II, but his story is just one of many about children who fought in the war. In memory of those small heroes, the Soviet writer Valentin Kataev wrote the novel Son of the Regiment. That was precisely what Seryosa was.
Yes. Anyway, it's the end of the video, so remember to like and subscribe and all that, and I'll see you in the next one.